Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list was just dropped, and it changed a few things, but I do want to talk about what I expect to be the best decks going forward in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. Now, obviously, Kashtira right now is the best deck, along with things like Pearly and Super Heavy Samurai and Sprite and stuff like that, but with the new ban list, a lot of those decks got hit. In fact, all four of those that I just named were all hit in some regard. So what's changed, what's going to be the best, and what to look forward to moving forward. Starting here with, here is the list of decks here. Starting with Exorcist. Honestly, I don't expect this deck to do very well. I'm going to put it in Rogue. It has a very specific thing that it does, and it plays very well with graveyard interactions like tier, and I don't expect tier to all of a sudden be tier 1 again, so I really don't see this doing very well, especially since I do expect things like Kashtira to still be sticking around, and yeah, I don't see this doing very well. It can play the game, it can do things very well, but I don't see it doing exceptional. Pearly did get hit pretty heavily, but you still have access to the ability to actually go into your rank up plays. You're still able to basically do this very similar things, even without the delicious memory at 3. You're still able to see it pretty consistently. You are able to search it out and yada yada. But I do think that it definitely received a big nerf. I would have normally put it in tier 1 alongside things like Kashtira and Super Heavy Samurai, but instead I do think that it has dropped that tier to tier 1.5. It's still very strong, still very much like a deck to look out for. One of the things that I would expect to see at, topping. But even with that being said, it still was seeing significantly less success in the TCG than it did in like the OCG. So hard to say, but I think a big thing with that is just like it doesn't play, like you don't have to worry about Max C in the OCG with this, and so that definitely helped it. Dinomorphia is just bad. It's still bad. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. It didn't really gain anything, didn't really lose anything from the ban list. So there you go. Kashtira I still expect to be the best deck. I'm going to say it right now. I don't think that the hits did enough. Sure, the Diablosis ban was nice, but oftentimes what I ended up seeing was that the one Arise Heart was basically all that was necessary, and so I don't really see it being all that important for it to going to 1, especially with Diablosis also being banned, meaning that the one Arise Heart doesn't matter. It's not going to get banished by something like that Diablosis. So there's that. And the 2 Unicorn is basically a joke, not really changing anything. So yeah, Kashtira is still probably the best deck. Hard to say exactly what's going to be the best deck, but yeah, that's my guess. Gishki, it's fine. It does stuff. It can still kind of loop. You can play sprites with it, which is nice. But all things considered, I don't really see Gishki being all that great. I don't think the Rockets got anything too nice, but not having to deal with as powerful of a Kashtira is nice. So I'm going to put that, I want to put them up here, but they're not really all that great. I'm going to put them in tier 2. Trying to think what I expect to be top tier. And I'm still going to put them in tier 2. The Bestials just aren't really going to be very good at the moment. They don't really interact with Super Heavy Samurai. The only deck that they really interact with out of the top decks right now would be Sprite, kind of. But Sprite can still very heavily play around the Bestials and stuff like that. So I really don't see them doing all too well. But I'm going to put them at like the top of tier 2. Dragon Link is still very good, being able to play in, a very like minimalist hand with, or minimalist board with some very nice hand traps. The Bestials are incredible powerhouses by themselves. So it's still pretty good overall. You can banish your own cards as well to get additional advantage. So it's not insanely necessary that your opponent has cards to interact with, but it does make it a little bit better. Next up, we have Plunder. I think Plunder is very strong. It does require a much better pilot than I think most decks, but I'm still going to put it at tier 2. Still very strong. Being able to go Yord and like give your opponent a token, especially with Kashtira, kind of requiring it's special summon or its board to be clear so that you can actually special summon. Being able to give your opponent something like that is very nice. However, giving like Super Heavy Samurai a token isn't exactly great, especially since it's at level 4. But yeah, having access to Yord makes it a lot stronger. And then you can also still play the full adventure engine, which is very nice. You can also play the Runics, which did receive a bit of a nerf, but even then it's still good. I just don't think that they're quite bad enough to be rogue, but they're definitely like the bottom of tier 2. Next up, we have Tri-Brigade. Tri-Brigade's still good, but however, with Kashtira being my expected best deck still, they don't really play well against the rest of the meta as well. So I'm going to put them in Rogue. Still playable, not insane. There you go. Sword Soul. Sword Soul is a deck that is just constantly slept on. I genuinely think I'm going to put them... Oh, I want to put them up here, but they're not quite there. I'm going to put them at the top of tier 2, even above Dragon Link. They are very strong, do not get me wrong, but I don't think that they can do quite as much without the Protoss. And even with that being said, they're still able to end on some pretty decent boards. The ability to play second as well as going first without really sacrificing too many cards and just kind of like in-engine stuff is very nice. With like the Tenyis, etc., etc. They don't really have any limitations other than the Protoss ban, so they're basically at full power, allowing them to do quite a lot. So Sword Soul is still very good and definitely slept on. Next up, we have Branded. Branded is like the 5th best deck right now, and they lost Expulsion, which was mostly their game plan, but even with that being said, I think it was a bad game plan overall. A lot of people would be like, okay, I'm going to stop you from playing the game for one turn, and then sit on my hands and kind of do nothing, because they didn't really get anything else off of that. I still think Branded is very strong, and with kind of everything else above it getting more hits, I do think that it is pretty well positioned, bottom of tier 1.5. Mathmech received quite a bit of a hit, but this is more of like just cyber strategies in general. I think just the limitation of circular is pretty big. You still have access to it with the triple Signet Mining, triple Small World, and then the one circular itself. That's still 7 copies, which is very easy to still see, but all in all, it is less, which does matter, and that does mean that if you stop the one circular, their game plan is kind of turned off. They can't really go for that multiple turns, so you're just kind of sitting there like, okay, well, I hope that that works. So it does mean that stopping the circular actually does matter now a lot more, and so yeah, a lot more that you can do with that. But circular is an absolutely insane card, so I'm glad that it was hit. As for the rest of it, the cyber strategies are still very strong. Adagnister is still very strong. You can do the Mathmech stuff into like Dark Fluid and stuff like that, which is still very good, and it's still overall a decent deck. I believe it was like 5th or 6th best deck previously. I'm gonna just move it down like two or three spots. So there you go. Next up, we have Labyrinth. If you do not know the Furniture Labyrinth build, this build is very, very strong, and it was kind of just not able to keep up with Kashtira in terms of a grind game, but it can keep up with basically every other deck. And now, with Kashtira specifically losing a lot of that grind game due to the 1 Arise Heart, I do think that Labyrinth in particular is very well positioned. I don't think that it is the best deck, or like even the second best, but I do think that it is able to compete and is definitely a tier 1 strategy moving forward. It can also play a more like trap heavy variant, but I wouldn't say that that's as good because you're not able to kind of grind out the opponent's game. So there you go. I do think that Labyrinth is very strong and is honestly still one of the best decks. Even right now, it's still, up there in the upper echelon, consistently topping, etc., etc. Next up, we have Manadome. They're good. I don't know. They do stuff. I don't really have anything to say because I really haven't seen them do well at like top tournaments or anything like that. So I can't really say for certain whether or not they will be good or bad or just kind of middle of the road. But I feel like they just kind of fit Rogue. That's kind of like top of Rogue, right on that echelon of top tier, but not quite. Satellar kind of feel very similar. Probably less so than like Tri-Brigade even. But I'm going to put them above Tri-Brigade. Yeah, they're a decent deck. They're kind of doing the same things that they did prior to the new support. They're just doing it more consistently, and like it's slightly better. It's not a whole lot to write home about, but hey, at least it's more consistent, and they're able to spam out a little bit more, which allows them for more interactions, which is a good thing. Overall, still not the greatest. Flu will always be a good deck. Yeah, it just will always be a good deck, even with the banning of the barrier statue and all of that jazz. It's still a very strong deck. In fact, it's not better than Cyberse right now, but it's still very good, top tier, definitely. And maybe not a deck to look out for. I think a lot more people are able to actually beat that due to the massive amount of hand traps, and specifically things like Droll and the like. But even with that being said, they're still able to very easily take games, playing things like the Harpies trap card, which I cannot remember the name of, but it just negates everything and is very strong and just kind of wins games by itself. So there you go. Generator is actually very, very good, all things considered. I'm going to put them at the top of Rogue. They have a lot going for them. The interactions that they have specifically are very unique. They're able to end on like Omni Negates, as well as Banishes, as well as like Steals and stuff like that. A lot of like non-targeted interaction as well. But they're not very specific in the way that they do that, and they do tend to still brick. Even though they got a whole bunch of consistency boosts, they're still able to brick like none other. Eldritch is still fine. They're good, but not nearly as good. We'll put them at the bottom near everything else. It's just Floodgates, but they lost a lot of the Floodgates. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. But even with that being said, they're still not all that great. A lot of people are able to just out the Floodgates or just play under the Floodgates pretty efficiently. So there you go. Makonko, I haven't seen literally do anything. I've seen like 2 games of it, and it's like, oh, this deck doesn't do anything. So I really don't know what this deck is supposed to do. I'm going to put Tier in Tier 2. Now, the only thing that they technically got was a weaker metagame and the Orange Light to 2. However, Tier still has a lot going for it. You still play all of the Kashtira stuff, and with Kashtira seeing less representation, I think that Tier is a little bit better. I still think that it has a lot going for it in terms of its power level and can still play pretty well overall. The biggest problem that I have with it is its consistency. It's not able to do that consistently, which does mean that overall it's not going to top a lot, but I still think that it has the ability and the capabilities to do so enough, right? I think it's similar in power to like Kashtira on a good day, or on a good, set of mills, but in terms of consistency, it's not very likely to happen. Still good though. Maybe I'll put it at like top of Rogue. I don't think it's quite top tier, but still very good. Then we have what I would say is the second best deck, pretty definitively, is Sprite. Sprite lost 1 card, that being the 3rd copy of Sprite Starter, and nothing else. And already it's the second best deck behind Kashtira. And so, yeah, and this is more so in terms of results. I think Sprite was like second best deck. So, yeah, there you go. A lot of people would say it's like 3rd or 4th or something like that best deck. But even with that being said, I would say probably second best. Moving on, we have Drytron. Drytron's fine. It does its thing sometimes. It just auto wins you the game by actually being able to combo off. But with Droll, it makes it much harder to do that. So, yeah, there you go. Next up, we have Trap Trick. Trap Trick is still very strong, being able to end on quite a few interactions and a lot of pretty unique interactions. The biggest problem with it is that they're all like trap holes, which means that you're not really able to like let your opponent's monster hit the board and then do something. You kind of have to just interact with it right then. A few instances you can actually interact with it after it comes out, but there's just not really a whole lot that this deck can do in terms of diversifying its interactions, which does kind of matter nowadays. So there you go. Next up, we have the Springins. Springins are good. They're pretty good. They're a bit inconsistent though, which is the biggest issue I would say with them. Their end boards are very strong, and their new support cards, that being like Tally-Ho and the new XZ, are also very strong, just like insane cards by themselves. The rest of the Springans, though, are just so weak that it doesn't really matter, and they kind of die to like one interaction. So not exactly the strongest, but they're also still very capable of taking games and winning pretty consistently. Runic, or more specifically Runic Naturia, is still a very strong deck. I believe they lost one of the trap card as well as one fountain, and that's basically it. And they were, again, one of the better decks of the current format, but even with that being said, I still don't see them being... I still think that they're probably tier 1.5. They're still very strong, and definitely a deck to watch out for. I don't think that they're losing a whole bunch, but I'd put them probably below all of this stuff. Dark World loses to itself or just entirely plays the game by itself. It is not determined by anything that you have to do. I'm going to put it at the top of everything else. Adultery's in here as well. Don't really need to talk about this. Along with Sky Striker, I'm actually going to put it at the bottom of Rogue. I know, crazy. Sky Striker's crazy. It's so good. Oh my gosh, Engage is at 2? That's insane. You can't do that. No, Engage is fine. I personally hate the card, but I think that it's not going to change anything. Having all of their cards go to 3, I think really wouldn't change anything. Maybe they're like at the top of Rogue. That's the biggest difference. Sky Striker just kind of can't keep up with how fast the game is now and how powerful every individual card is now. Like, have you read Unicorn? That card just does everything for the entire archetype. So, yeah, Sky Striker needing 2 or more cards is just not enough in today's modern metagame. So there you go. The last deck that I want to talk about, which I will hopefully try and put in here somewhere, is Super Heavy Samurai, which should go probably in between the Pearly and the Branded there. Super Heavy Samurai did lose a big hit, or did take a big hit with the loss of their Link 1, which really helped facilitate their strategies, being able to get multiple searches by going into that guy, being able to bring back another monster as well, and just like getting a whole bunch of materials onto your side of the field to go into things like Appaloosa and Baron and etc. etc. Really did hurt the deck quite a bit. But even with that being said, even prior to that, they were only like the second or third best deck of the format, and taking such a big hit, I think did bump them down a tier. So there you go. All things considered, I don't think much really changed. I think a few of the top decks kind of switched positions, but other than that, the meta is still basically the same. I guess like Mathmech is probably not as common as it previously was, and maybe Runic Naturia isn't as well, and Labyrinth is now more popular, but other than that, I really don't think much is changed, which is sad because the ban list was pretty big. I just don't think it hit the right cards. Hit a lot of cards, not the right ones. It's a quantity versus quality kind of debate. Now, I could be very wrong because of all of the cards that were unlimited and kind of changed that we don't I really don't think are going to do anything, but I do think that there is a possibility that this is just entirely shaken up and all of a sudden, like, Flunder is the best deck. I don't know. Like, there is a big shakeup that could happen, and who knows? I still think Cashier just wasn't hit enough. Thanks, Konami. Anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy it. If you did, a like is very much so appreciated. And if you want to check out more content like this, as well as more Yu-Gi-Oh!, then just be sure to subscribe. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.